What's up, guys? Doug Polk here. Today we're going to be talking about something pretty serious on the channel. I want to talk about how to prevent yourself from getting scammed, getting angled, some good tips to try and keep your money safe, how to know you're playing in a fair game, and then at the end of this video I want to talk about a story that happened to me that was pretty fucked up. My first piece of advice would be never loan anyone money. Now, sometimes you're going to have to do transactions in the poker world. That's kind of the cost of doing business. But I mean when players need money to go play a game, or they'll pay you back later, or whatever it is, do not take it. There's really no reason to take these deals, particularly when you're playing small to mid stakes. It's much more likely someone's not going to pay you back than it is that they're a very upstanding person. Now, I'm not saying that they're never going to pay you back. If you loan someone money, it's gone. But here's a good way of looking at it. Pretend every time that you loan someone money, that money is done, gone. Just remove it from your bank account, count it as missing. All of a sudden, not so fun to loan money, is it? So learn your lesson right now. Don't loan people money. The only exception might be if you know someone's financial situation very well. For example, I'd probably loan my good friend Ryan Fia $1 or $2, but in general, do not loan people money except when you actually have data that proves that they have consistent income. The natural next topic then from there are trades. Now, unfortunately in poker, it's hard to have your money in all places unless you have a lot of money, and particularly when you're coming up in the game at smaller mid stakes, it's unlikely you're going to have money everywhere you want to play all the time. In fact, you probably shouldn't have money everywhere all the time. It'll leave you underrolled in situations where you might need to rebuy, or if you go on a downswing in one location. So you're going to have to trade money from time to time. Well, what can you do to protect yourself in those spots? There are a few things. First off, if you have a good name in the community, don't send first. I know if no one sent first, trades would never happen, but you need to gauge it a little bit more fairly. Think about it like this. Of the two people, who is more reputable within the community? And I know that's going to lead to some arguments, but look, if it's close and you don't know them that well, just don't trade if you send first. The problem with two unknown players are that at some point, someone's going to have to send first. There are a lot of transfer threads online where you can go and ask for a trade. When you do so and you're going to send first, make sure the account that is PMing you is the same one that's been in the thread before, that has gotten so many people scammed in a lot of those threads. And then second off, make sure that they have a legitimate reference, a legitimate vouch. They better have someone that actually is reputable that can say this person's good for it, or they need to have a long history of making successful trades. Make sure the account matches. I cannot stress that enough. I would also say when you're trading, especially for higher denominations and things like Bitcoin, where you can never reverse it and it can be a lot of money, take a moment or two and take the extra step to verify. Get them on the phone, have a video chat, see their face, hear their voice, know that it's actually this person. So if something does go wrong, you at least know that the right person did the wrong thing. Ultimately, especially if you're new to the poker community, you're going to have to put yourself in some spots you might not want to. But make sure they have references, a legitimate trade history, and do not send until everything gets ironed out. I know you might want your money now, but wouldn't you rather make sure you have all of your money tomorrow than possibly lose all your money today? I also want to make a note about people with reputable names. Sometimes people, even if you heard of their name, aren't in a good financial position and can still roll you. A few years ago, probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I had to post online when I sent Brad Booth $30,000 and he wasn't able to pay me my money back. Now, I will say since then, Brad has been making payments to me and he's trying to do the right thing. I'm not sure if we're going to get there eventually or not, but it does say a lot about his character to continue to try and make things right. One last thing on trades. If the deal sounds too good to be true, it normally is. You guys might remember a story where the Bellagio bandit stole $1.6 million from the Bellagio and jetted away in his motorbike. Well, around this time, I was a local live poker player, man, those were the days, playing in some of the 2, 5, and 5-10 games around Las Vegas. I remember one day playing in a game of the Gold Nugget a few weeks after this had occurred. There was someone at my table trying to sell cranberry chips, which are $25,000, for $4,000. That is a massive warning sign. In fact, if he had offered it for $24,500 and said, I just can't be bothered to go over to the Bellagio, that's way more believable than if he just says, hey, I'll sell you this for $4K. $4K work, I just don't want to head over there. Why would you give a $21,000 discount on a legit chip? And there were some people that were actually buying these chips. I thought it was madness. Lord knows if they got out or not. But the point still remains, if it's too good to be true and you don't think it's possible, it probably isn't. Let's move on and talk about playing in a private game versus playing at a casino or a card room. Now, I have personally made the decision to not almost ever play at a private game unless the stakes are so small that I don't mind something crazy happening. There are just so many problems that can happen in private games. Just to name a few, the rate can be outrageously high. The players can be colluding against you. The deck could be rigged in some kind of way where you're destined to lose or face huge coolers. The game could get held up by someone trying to rob the game. The game could get held up by authorities learning about a game and holding it up as well. There are just so many problems that can happen to you when you're playing in a private game. Now, are each of these things very likely? No, they're not. But you have to think about these things in terms of EV. If you get held up for all your money, what's the EV of that? Well, you lose everything that you have. That's a pretty bad result. Or if someone, is rigging the deck, you could lose everything you have and then end up in further debt by them loaning you money and losing that too. These things all have a price. And this is one reason, these are really the main reasons why I chose to not be a part of that scene. Now, I get these games can be soft. I understand that. But if you're going to play in a private game, make sure that you know the people very well and you have it on good authority that the game is legit. That still might not keep you safe. So only play private games when you're all right that these things can occur. And additionally, the stakes won't be so huge that you're going to be seriously financially hurt if they do occur. Or you could just play at legit establishments like major online sites or casinos or card rooms where you're for sure getting a fair shake. Now, it won't totally stop things. Maybe once in a while there's a little bit of collusion going on, but at least if that's happening, there are people watching and taking note. Two people always play at the same table and end up maybe doing some things that look a little manipulative. There's a chance that they get caught, but the other things are all completely not going to happen. You're not generally going to find outrageous rake. You're not going to have the game rated unless you're playing at the bike.
Federal agents have raided the Bicycle Hotel and Casino in Bell Gardens. A federal search warrant is being conducted by the Los Angeles High Intensity Financial Crime Task Force.
I also want to talk about marked cards. Marked cards are actually a thing, and I know it sounds like something you might see in the movies, and it's definitely brought up more than it probably happens, but there are many ways where cards can end up marked, intentional or not. Either way, whether it was meant to happen or not, it's still a marked card, and you should be aware of the cards that you're playing with. If you're going to play at a TV table, oftentimes the machine can make markings on the card because it's shuffling it automatically. If these markings become severe, it is your duty to protect yourself by getting a new deck. This doesn't just happen at small stakes. It happened this year in the one drop, four-handed, millions on the line. I looked down at one of my cards and it's clearly marked. Not intentionally, the machine did it, but the point still remains. What if someone realizes that one of the cards has such bad markings they can tell what card it is? You open the door for potential cheating. Even if they're maybe not doing it on purpose, although in this example, it kind of seems like they are, you don't want that to be a possibility. Check the cards when you play, make sure there's no markings on them, and if you feel like something sketchy is going on, get a new deck. However, don't be one of those assholes who gets a new setup because they're running bad. That's just not cool, man. Intentional card marking happens too. There was a case a couple of years ago in the Heads Up No Limit tournament, the 10K at the World Series of Poker, I think it was last year or the year before, where a player went really deep and was likely marking his cards. Now, there wasn't any actual proof, but he got kicked out of a bunch of European casinos for marking cards, and then somehow went deep in this tournament as well, and he played kind of slow and was constantly messing with his cards. Be careful. There are a lot of problems when it comes to marking cards. And I will say that from my knowledge, and this was told to me by someone that's more in the know than I am, players will sometimes mark cards. They normally won't mark the aces because that's really obvious to see. They'll mark the 10s where they know if a straight is coming or not, or if a player has a 10, then it's much less likely they're going to get caught. Oftentimes they'll do it by dabbing some very light ink on a card so they can pick it up, but there are all kinds of ways this can happen. Do your best to protect yourself, and if something seems strange, get a new deck of cards. There's no reason not to. This isn't really related, but it's something you should do as well. If a dealer deals you a card and it might have flashed, I would always just take the card back and get a new one, because you have a right to a card that has certainly not been shown to anyone. Not, oh, you guys see it? No, we're good? I'll take the card. There's no reason to risk it. Just get a brand new card. There's no need to have that one right there. Let's also quickly highlight a couple of problems we saw earlier this year just to set the record straight. Always have your large denomination chips up front, but that does not absolve you of asking your opponent how much they have. If your opponent moves in or starts to make a serious bet, you have a right to know their stack. Ask them how much they have. They have to at least make their stack visibly clear. Some players will answer, some players won't. They do not have to answer. In fact, if you don't feel comfortable saying how many chips you have in a spot, just show your chips clearly. As long as the higher denomination ones are up front and your chips are clearly visible, that's totally fine. They do not have to say the amount of chips, and neither do you. Don't say it if you don't feel comfortable doing so. Now, once you've asked and you see how many chips they have roughly, you now can act based on that, especially if they tell you an amount that, it looks to be about correct. But always do your personal best job to make sure you know your opponent's exact stack size so you don't get held accountable for their mistake. This is definitely a tip for more new players, but I'll say it anyway. When you look at your cards, make sure to cup them fully, blocking the sides of vision to your cards. I've seen this 5, 6, 7 times this year where I could see someone's cards next to me. Now, as far as what the etiquette is, if you see that, the way that I look at it is the first time that you see them, you should always tell the player as well as the table. Hey man, I saw that you had the 4 of hearts, or maybe a low red card, whatever. Let them know, and that's fair to the game. But after that first warning, it's kind of on them. In fact, I had a table this year at the World Series of Poker where I told someone to my right, they did it again, I told them again, and then they actually started to get kind of mad at me. I was like, all right, man, when I look over, if I see cards, I'm going to see cards, but I guess I'm not going to say anything. But make sure you say something the first or second time so your opponent at least has an opportunity to fix it. Past that, if they don't want to, whatever. I mean, you want to show me your cards, man, I guess let's play poker. Also, while you're playing poker, keep your stacks of chips in the same denomination of stacks. If you have, let's say, 30 chips, either do 30 or 20 and 10. If you have 60, do 40 and 20, or do 23 times. Don't just have 12, 19, and then 46 on the other one, because then other players can't really tell what you have while you're playing. They have a right to know how much you have, just like you personally know how much you're playing. So make sure to keep even stacks, and I think there are a lot of card rooms that actually enforce a rule where they have to be in 10 or 20 stacks. If you don't know what your opponent has, you're also within your rights to ask for fair and equal counted stacks. If you're on the river and it's on your opponent and you think you heard something, always wait for dealer clarification. Do not just start snap doing things or bad things can happen to you. In fact, that kind of reminds me of what happened to Matt Glantz in this story he told over the summer.
3-bet is to him and it's his action. He takes his chips, puts them in his fist like this, goes like this, pulls them back. I'm sorry, he goes like this. I then call and
I
call, turn over my cards, and then he goes like this. I'm not all in. And I said, what the fuck's going on? What's going on here? And he said, my chips didn't touch the felt.
These kinds of things can happen and people can often be super scammy. So make sure the dealer announces what they have. They either throw the all-in plate out, they throw the call plate out, wait for verification. If the dealer doesn't do anything and they say it again, you can ask them, or you can ask the dealer, did they say call, did they say whatever? Do not show your hand. Do not do anything until it has been clearly defined what your opponent does, or you will always open yourself up to angles about what they said. I want to talk about online poker here for a second. I know we did a lot of live stuff there, but when you're playing online poker, you should also try to be careful about possible collusion or people being able to see your cards. Let's talk about collusion here first. If you're playing in games with a lot of players from the same location who always seem to play together, it's completely fine to leave and try and get a better game. These things do happen, but I also think people overestimate how much they do happen. Particularly on the larger sites, they generally have good teams to catch collusion. Now, it can still happen. I'm not saying you're always going to get 100% a fair game, but if people do this stuff too consistently, they will get caught, banned, and the money generally ends up going back to the players who lost it. So don't live in fear that people are colluding against you, but still try and keep an eye on who's playing at your table, and don't be afraid to get a fresh lineup to make sure you're getting a fair game. This leads me into the story that I'm going to tell you guys about when somebody hacked all of the computers at my house and could see what my hole cards were. It was 4 or 5 years ago, and there was a guy named Joshua Tyler who tried to become friends with me. He knew a lot of the other high-stakes people in the poker scene and took an interest in wanting to hang out with me a bit more. Now, one weekend he agreed to come over, or rather he asked me if he could come over and stay at my place for the weekend and hang out. And I was a lot more easygoing. I tried to meet more people. I was still kind of coming up in the poker world and wanted to make friends. So I said, sure, he's welcome to stay for the weekend. I had a few other roommates too, and he could just take one of the guest rooms and we could hang out. Well, when he came over to my place, we ended up not really hanging out too much at all. And I remember specifically one day I asked him if he wanted to go out to lunch. He said no, he was just going to stay behind, and I asked him if he wanted some food. He gave me his food order, and I left to go to the local Mexican place. I think it was called Zaba's here in Las Vegas. Well, while I was gone, he put Trojans on my computer, every one of my computers at my house, as well as my roommates' computers. I got back, and then he kind of peaced out after just one day of hanging out. There was also a really awkward moment that day where he was using my shower without my consent. And I mean, I know the guy's European, but dude, there's a line. Anyway, after the guy left my place, I went on a big road trip. I went to a few different countries, and I remember getting into Tokyo, Japan, and I wanted to play a little Heads Up No Limit on my laptop. I fired up a couple of tables, I think there's some higher stakes games going, and I sat stakes from 510 to 5100. At this point, a screen named Forbidden 456 or 436 sat my 510 table. He kicked it off playing extremely weird. Tighten the small blind, tighten the big blind, lots of very small re-raises, and post-flop constantly min-raising me all over the place. He quickly won 3.5 buy-ins before he asked me if we played higher stakes. This is pretty unique for fish in general. I would say when you play weaker players, they tend to just keep grinding the stake that they're at, or maybe leave and sit you, but they rarely challenge you to higher stakes. We started playing 25-50, and I was getting a little bit worried. Some hands that were going down were just downright crazy. There were hands that were, my opponent always on the river was like min-raising or folding. There were hands where he was making sick hero calls on the river. And my personal favorite hand is the hand that follows. I open this hand up with 10-4 suited, and Forbidden 536 makes the call. The flop comes King 9-5. He leads. I raise with my backdoor flush draw as well as backdoor straight draw, and he decides to call. The turn of the Queen of Clubs, I turn a backdoor flush draw and backdoor straight draw. He checks, I barrel, he calls, setting up around a pot-sized river bet. The river comes a king, which is not a very good card to be bluffing on. He checks, I check back, and he shows me Jack Deuce offsuit. That's correct. He led King 9-5 and called a raise with Jack Deuce offsuit on King 9-5. This is the most clear cheating ever. There's no way you could ever play a hand like this unless you knew the guy at 10 high. I mean, could you make it any more obvious? So in the session, my mind started racing. I started to play a lot slower and think things over, as well as writing out an email on my phone to PokerStars. I said that I thought I was playing someone that was very suspicious and to freeze their account immediately and investigate. I sent the email off and played extremely slowly while waiting a couple more hands. There was one, I think, other large hand that I had that was weird too, and eventually I quit him. Well, PokerStars actually came through for me here, and they locked the guy's account and launched an investigation. So I started to put the whole thing together. Josh being at my place, this happening right after, and a couple of my other roommates had some suspicious things happen too. It all started to look like it was going to be from Joshua Tyler. Not to mention the account was from the UK, and Josh is from the UK, so that didn't help his case either. After getting all of the evidence together, I posted everything that I knew on 2+2 in a post. If you guys want to read it, you can read below, but basically given an exact summary of what had occurred. Afterwards, Josh called me angrily, saying, "You have to take this thread down, take it down or I'll sue you." And I said, "Josh, if you want me to take it down, I'm going to need for you to tell me a few pieces of information and also let me know that we're going to work together to try and clear your name. Because I don't know for sure it's you, but it certainly does look like you given all of the other implications." He says, "Okay, I'll work with you. We'll post in the thread. We'll go from there." We hang up the phone. 30 seconds later, I get called back. "Actually, I won't work with you. Take it down or whatever." And I basically just said, "Look, I'm not going to take it down. We're going to run the investigation and see what happens." Ultimately, PokerStars issued me an almost full refund of all $35,000 that I was out, so I got most of my money back. In fact, it was almost all of my money back. After I came forward with my story, a series of other people PM'd me or also posted in the thread that they had the exact same thing happen to them. Josh came for the weekend, left early, and then all of a sudden their accounts were getting destroyed. They were losing to the accounts that would show up out of nowhere and just blast them in any game that they were playing. So I don't have concrete proof that it was Joshua Tyler, but I think situationally speaking, it almost certainly was. And given the fact that it happened to other people, it seems almost certain, in my opinion. This isn't the only example of someone trying to superuse another player's computer. This happened at Barcelona a few years ago, where someone went into Jeans89's room and put something on his computer, and he got into the room from a key from the hotel. He didn't even end up getting in trouble, and he got into this person's room without permission. This stuff goes down. It happened a bunch back in the day. It happened on, Ultimate Bet with at least a couple of players like Russ Hamilton. And you guys have to be aware of the fact your computer can potentially be compromised, and these shadier, smaller sites, not that UB was even a smaller site, but some of these smaller sites can also be compromised and players can see your cards. So try to stick to larger sites where you're more safe, and keep your computer that plays poker somewhere where it's much harder to access. If you're going to be playing significant stakes, you should basically have a poker-only computer that you keep in a safe and is only available when you're playing poker. If you're going to be traveling around with it, maybe debate taking it with you or putting it in the safe, but keep yourself protected. There are a lot of great people in the game of poker, but there are plenty of bad ones as well. Most of them, I think, end up only scamming because they put themselves in a bad spot and they simply can't pay back, but that still shouldn't become your responsibility. Worse than that, there are people marking cards or angling or hacking computers or colluding or rigging games, and you should always do your best to protect yourself. At the end of the day, there's only one person that's ever going to look out for your best interests, and that's you. If you guys learned from this video, you might enjoy another video I did a couple months ago where I talked about this new way that people can get into your text message and use that to hack you. The link is in the description below if you want to check that out. Also, if you enjoyed today's video, hit subscribe and join the team. We do a lot of different stuff here on the channel, some fun stuff, some security stuff, some hand analysis, some news, and there's usually something for everyone in the world of poker, so hit subscribe and join the team.